everybody. Thanks for listening and welcome to the Real World Productivity Podcast. Title of today's interview is Sending Tasks Out to Get More Done. I'm Adam Moody, and today I'm talking with the founder of Sendtask.io, Cedric Waldburger, about his background in productivity and some of the tips, methods, and secrets that every entrepreneur should know to shortcut success with productivity and get some great results faster. So welcome, Cedric. How's it going?
Hey, very good. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Good deal. Well, happy to have you here. And I'm just going to kind of jump right into this. The first set of questions I have for you is just about your background and experience in the field of productivity so that the entrepreneurs in the audience can understand a little bit more about who you are, where you're coming from, and maybe how they can relate. So would you mind telling us just a bit about yourself, your background, education, anything like that you feel is relevant? Again, like we talked about, just whatever you feel comfortable with and you think might help people understand you a little bit.
Yeah, of course. So I started my first company when I was 14, kind of by accident. It was a friend of me and a friend of mine and me starting to work on websites. This was 2002. I was 14. He was 18. It started as a hobby and then suddenly developed into a real company with employees. And suddenly I was in a spot where I realized, because I was going to high school at the time, and later I started studying at ETH. I studied electrical engineering. So I've always had to kind of balance two important areas in my life, work and studying very early on. And I think that's what led to me being so fascinated with life hacks and productivity hacks and just generally thinking a lot about how to get the most out of my time and out of my day.
Good deal. And did you have any, going through that, so kind of starting at 14, and getting started early, did you have any sort of like formal training, or was it, wow, I'm getting busy, I need to figure something out?
I think it was mostly the second. I was, as you can imagine, I was quite overwhelmed with the responsibilities and the sudden traction that we had. But then quickly found peers and discussed my problems or challenges. And of course, my business partner helped a lot. And we started to build a team and learned a lot about myself and how I work during that period, and started to fine tune that over and over again.
I think you hit on something really interesting. Of the people I've interviewed, actually, I don't think anyone's talked about this. And having a peer group or a mastermind or a group, it has something that I came across in probably the last 3 or so years that has helped me tremendously. And I always recommend it to people. Find some people who can help you. Find some people who are doing what you want to do, and talk to them about that. And I assume, is that something you continue to this day, or was that something you just kind of did at the time?
No, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest life hacks for me is finding peers or people who have done it before, who are willing to share experiences with me. One group that I found tremendously helpful for me is the Entrepreneurs organization, which is a worldwide organization. They have about 15,000 members, and they're organized in local chapters. I'm currently in the Zurich chapter, the Swiss chapter. And what we do is we meet once a month with they call it forum, which is a group of 8 to 12 people, and you exchange experiences. So the key thing about this organization is you're not allowed to give advice. You're only allowed to share experiences, which when you think about it is so much more powerful, because it's not about like what you would do, but what you actually did and what happened when you did a certain thing.
No, I think that's very powerful. It's funny. This is very closely aligning with some stuff I'm doing. I just had a group meeting and we got together for the first time about 6 months ago. And that was one of the basis. One of the very few rules is, experience comes first. If it's an opinion, you need to make it clearly known, that's the case. That's really interesting. I think that's something too people could use for productivity. Is not just reading books, although books is a great way to obviously learn from people who are maybe doing something ahead of where you're at. But joining a group, talking to other people about productivity, you never know who's got, this great system for doing these types of things. So, cool. Well, then that kind of brings us up to kind of the almost modern time, I guess. You went through school, electrical engineering, all that, and then kind of what have you done, or what did you do since then?
So I was part of a few startups. The first one is agency business that's running till this day. I'm still a board member. And then there were a few other experiments. Some went well, some didn't go so well. learned a lot from that. And then about 5-6 years later, I I made some money, and I was fortunate enough to be where I could become an investor. And I've used that to invest in startups and really learn from them about the process of how do you go from an idea that you had at the bar last night to 1 million. And 1 million could be $1 million in revenue. It could be 1 million packages shipped or 1 million users, but really deconstruct this process of how to build a company from idea to 1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I've noticed while we were doing that is that internally, there's so many great productivity tools that made each and every one of these companies more efficient and more productive. But when it came to talking to their clients and freelancers and suppliers, they always reverted back to email. And from that was one of the learnings that led to me founding Sendtask, or first building a prototype. Because I was interested to build something like Asana or Trello or Basecamp. So something that allows you not to just share text blobs, but augmented information with due dates and making it so that you could complete it and you could track who's working on what. I saw that immensely helped inside the team to be more efficient and better organized. But it didn't work with outsiders because they had to create an account first. And so I tested, I think, 48 or 49 different task managers.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a single one that allowed me to seamlessly onboard suppliers and clients. And then I started working. I thought this must be like, can't be that this doesn't exist, because I think it would be extremely helpful. And just to see if I would actually use it and if it would be as helpful as I imagined, I started building it myself, started working on a small prototype. I was looking for a pet project to code again anyway. And so I started working on a prototype for Sendtask, built a system that allows you to share tasks with anyone over email. And that person doesn't have to create an account in order to interact with the task. So it's basically an Asana or Basecamp or Trello that doesn't require accounts. And that's how the idea was born. I shared it with a few friends. I started using it myself. And I discovered how immensely more productive it made me, the fact that I could just track everything, and not just my team, but I could track all interactions with journalists or business partners, freelancers, without giving them an introduction first or a walkthrough of the app first, because it was so simple. And that's how we came up with the idea for Sendtask.
Yeah, that's good. I know you'd had a blog post, I think it was from August, on 64thanks.com, where you were talking about this. You've got this stack of apps. You got communication, scheduling, tasks, and data storage, and then there's multiple apps in all of those, but nothing that really ties it together. So, that's a very familiar pain, and I'm sure a lot of people can identify with that. And I'll just say right now, like I've tried out Sendtask recently. And I'm going to be implementing that to deal with just the problem you're describing. Because like you said, having to onboard someone, or, I have someone who's maybe contracting and they need to do 1 or 2 tasks. I don't need them fully integrated into my system. I just need them to be able to do something reliably. And yeah, that I think is pretty powerful with Sendtask. As far as I know, that doesn't exist anywhere else.
We at least haven't found another app that does it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had to, we didn't want to build Sendtask, but we felt like the pain was big enough to go through the process and see if we can build this and find other users who have the same issue or who are looking for a similar solution. And we find that especially for agencies, it's the perfect tool to not only manage their internal team. Very often they use something like Basecamp or Asana or Trello, but also to keep their clients and suppliers more updated, or keep them updated in a more automated way. The first business that I built, MediaSign, was an agency, and about 30% of what our consultants were doing was just checking in with clients and seeing when they would deliver a certain product or asset. And using Sendtask has been a huge productivity boost for them.
I believe it. So that kind of answers part of this, but I'm curious if I asked you specifically, like what tools, or rather what tasks do you commonly see people using Sendtask for right now? Like, what's the big use that people use it for?
Typically, it starts with work tasks. So you can create projects or single tasks, individual tasks. It can be anything from, hey, can you please send that report over, or can you please update this and that spreadsheet, to let's plan the launch of this website in a project that we all share with each other. Mm-hmm. That's typically how it starts, but then people realize that they can bring that efficiency boost to other areas of their life, and they start planning their vacation on Sendtask, or their shopping list that they want to share with their flatmates or their spouse. And then people get really creative. We've seen a lot of different use cases. Also stuff like, so we have a feature for recurring tasks. So just read a chapter in a book every week is something that you can type into our natural language bar, and it creates a task that reminds you weekly to read a chapter in a book. Or same for workouts.
Nice. Actually, that's funny. I think that's literally what I typed in when I was first signing up, was read a book every week. That's good. Okay, well, in my mind, no app is an island unto itself. No matter how good any app is, there's generally something or some integration that really helps. So do you see people commonly using other tools, or, integrating it? Like, I know that people use it offline. I'm just kind of curious how you see people using this in the real world, if that makes sense.
You mean so I think one thing that's extremely helpful with Sendtask is our Slack integration, because we see that other teams that are distributed, so the Sendtask team is completely distributed, and we use Sendtask to build Sendtask. But we also use something for communication, and for us, the choice was Slack. Mm-hmm. And we've built a Slack integration where you can A, create tasks directly from Slack, and B, you can also check what you should be working on or what's due today directly from Slack. So you don't need to switch to Sendtask all the time just to check these basic, just to perform these basic actions. And what we've seen is that before we had Sendtask, what very often happened is we would have a discussion on Slack about a certain bug or feature or marketing idea. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of ended up just being in that Slack archive, but no one ever took care of it. And so what we did is build an integration for Sendtask, where you can just type in natural language. You could say something like /Sendtask, hey, Adam, could you please follow up with our key account manager on the January numbers until Monday? And what Sendtask will do is extract all the information from what I've said there. So it will assign it to you. It will set the due date to next Monday, and it will create a title that says to send over that or to check in with those clients from January.
Nice.
And this has been extremely helpful for us to not forget things, or to actually get things done after we discuss them. Yeah. We create a task directly from Slack. It doesn't interrupt our workflow. We can keep discussing stuff, but we know now it's on a task list and someone is going to take care of it until a certain due date.
I really like that. As someone who helps lead company meetings, that that can be a huge problem. And I call it the this isn't the greatest name for this, but the single neck to choke. Like, one person is responsible for a task, but in a team, you come up with this great idea, but if it's not said explicitly who's doing it, then a lot of times, if it's assigned, or if there's more than one person, then it might not ever get done because everyone just assumes somebody else is going to do it.
Yeah, and also for just product ideas, like sometimes it's not as actionable as let's do it next Monday, but just as, hey, this idea, we should put it on a list. Sendtask is pretty good for that as well. You can do the same thing from Slack and just put it on a project list or a task list inside Sendtask. And that's what we often do with product ideas. Like, we're discussing one thing and someone comes up with an idea, then we just put that on that list so we know we can go back to it later on. And then we can continue our discussion.
Nice. That's a great idea. I'm going to check that out. Cool. Well, one other blog post that I was interested in, I noticed, because this was a question I wanted to ask you anyways, and so I went and looked, and sure enough, you guys had talked about it, but you were talking about the top 5 tools used by the team, and you had them listed as Sendtask, the Google App Suite, Slack, Appear.in, and Intercom. So I was just curious, are there any others, or has that changed at all? I'm not sure. I don't have the published date, but I was just curious if you guys use anything else, or if that's changed around, or there's some other super powerful tools that you guys go to.
We've since switched from appear.in to mostly using Zoom, which is a great for video. The key feature made a switch is that in Zoom you have phone numbers that you can use to call into an ongoing video call. So sometimes if someone is on a bad connection, they can just call in via their GSM phone, and that usually guarantees that they at least have good audio, even though the video stream might not be great. And it also allows for very simple recording to the cloud and archiving our weekly calls so that someone who misses the call can easily go back and just watch the last one, so that we don't need to, in parallel to the video, keep minutes and update people individually.
Gotcha.
So that's the one that we've switched. Other than that, I'd say we try to keep it. I'm sure we use more apps, but those are the ones that we kind of use day in, day out to keep us organized.
No, it makes sense. And I understand, like, you should definitely try to use or focus only on a few, but, inevitably there's other ones you have to use, whether it's, Dropbox for certain connections or something like that.
Right.
Well, cool. And just in general, obviously, I think this is probably your role as a founder, is looking out at the future. I'm curious, what changes, if any, do you see kind of coming in the next few years for tech as far as productivity or time management? Do you see any big changes to apps or platforms or what have you?
Well, I'm waiting for the moment where all of this gets a lot more integrated and more intelligent. I hope the AI revolution will be able to feel that a lot more. Right now, we can read a lot about it, but I feel we're only starting to see the surface of it. Like, for example, when I use Google Inbox, I know it suggests answers every here and there, but I feel hopefully we'll all go a lot further, and we'll be able to interact with our virtual assistants almost in the same way that we use actual assistants nowadays.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll put that on my list. I would like that as well.
Yeah.
So kind of moving into a different part here, but I'm just curious, what's something you kind of wish someone had shared with you as far as being productive for being an entrepreneur once you kind of moved into that space post college or school? Like, what would you tell somebody just getting started in terms of how they can be more productive or be more efficient with their time?
I think for me, one thing that really helped me be more productive or increase my output is focus. So for a very long time, I tried to do too many things at the same time. And I've tried to, for example, I've always been involved with multiple full-time projects at the same time. First, it was studying and my first company, and then it was several startups in parallel. And I'm still working on getting to just one and being super focused. But I've learned to reduce other areas and really focus on one or two things at the time. One way I've done this is about 3 years ago, or maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I started, I was intrigued by this question: how much stuff do I actually own? And I started running through my apartment and collect everything that I owned and note it down, just because I was interested to understand, like, how much is it actually that I own, and what's the maintenance that I put up with for all my stuff. And since then, since I've realized I own so much stuff that I don't actually need, I've minimalized a lot of it, so much that 2 years ago I've given up on having an apartment, and I've been constantly traveling ever since with just 64 things that fit into my backpack. And for me, it's these bold decisions and like questioning the traditional way of doing stuff or the status quo over and over again that I find is really, really interesting, and also has led to the biggest productivity improvements for me personally.
Gotcha. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Focus, I think, has become more and more important for myself over the years. And it's something I definitely have to work on all the time. Same thing, working on several projects, have to constantly reevaluate and just it's good because the results are always better once I focus. You gain clarity, things like that. So can certainly identify with that. I'm interested too in your 64 things. So that's on your blog and on your picture. What would you say? What would be number 65 if you could let yourself have 65 things?
Well, I'm actually down to less than 50 items right now, so I keep losing stuff. I'm not adding right now. Honestly, there's nothing that I miss, which is interesting because I think when I started and I first created the spreadsheet, I think I own more than 600 items, and at that point I considered myself to not have too much stuff, but I've gone all the way down to the roughly 50 items now, and there's not much that I miss, honestly. So it's super interesting. Like, I think every item has at least a couple or three purposes or more. Mm-hmm. So I feel I'm living a very full life, full of experiences, and I'm doing exactly what I want to do, and I don't need more than these 50 items, which was a revelation at first.
Definitely. Well, I've got a personal question because I'm a big reader. What do you use to read? Do you use a laptop or do you have a Kindle or anything like that?
So I don't have a Kindle anymore. I used to have one, but then I realized most of the time when I get to read is when I'm on airplanes or when I'm on the go. And so I've switched to audiobooks mostly. So okay. Audible or just MP3 files of books and texts and articles that I've converted to audio files. And then if I read text, then it's mostly on my phone.
Gotcha. All right. Well, this brings us up to the last question I have for you, which now I'm really interested, especially after hearing kind of about the minimalism and how you go about this. But I'm curious, what is the book that you find yourself recommending to people the most often?
So it's actually not related to minimalism or essentialism. I think I've read a bunch of very good books in that area, but for me, when I recommend a book to others, it's mostly been something that I felt they might really enjoy but don't know yet, and it's often been Surely You're Choking, Mr. Feynman.
Great book.
Yeah, I just love how his like playful way of seeing life and experimenting and just doing really, really interesting stuff, but staying agile while doing it, like really advanced stuff, but still being and living that inner child all the time. I really enjoyed that book.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really funny. So my background actually is as an undergraduate was in physics, and so I've read all of Feynman's books, and he's an interesting character, and I completely agree with you that everyone who hasn't read that, it doesn't matter if you're into physics, if you're not, it has almost nothing to do with that. You should just read it. He's an incredibly interesting person and very down to earth. It's some great books. I agree. Oh, Cedric, still there?
Yes.
Nope. Sorry. Okay. I had a little audio hiccup. So on that note, we're going to wrap this up. I wanted to say thank you for a great interview, and I'm really appreciative of you taking the time to share your thoughts and all of this with everybody. Where can people go to find out some more about you and what you're working on?
Yeah, so if you want to try out Sendtask and see how sending tasks to anyone can simplify or make you more productive, go to sendtask.io. And if you want to find out more about me or get in touch, then my blog is at 64things.com. And the 64 is a 6 and a 4 as the number, and then things.com.
All right. Well, thanks again. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to invite you to check out www.productivity.academy today for more information on how you can better manage your time, become more productive, and just get more effective doing the things that you want to do and achieving the goals that you want. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next podcast.